Have you ever felt that you as a woman may not appear to measure up when you see incredible women in strong roles? You may be surprised when hearing from women in these positions and how we all share many of the same challenges. Thank you for joining us for the SheEO Lead-In podcast with Rebecca Jones as we share the journeys of women.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Jones, your host of SheEO Lead-In. We are on an exploration together to discover more about the personal journeys of incredible women in both career and life. We all have paths to share that sometimes take incredible turns, deep resilience, and courage to navigate. My hopes are that the challenges shared here encourage women to take leaps of faith and growth when a journey feels too difficult or unachievable. There is great strength deep within each one of us. These stories are meant to share the ways strong women have taken their dreams to strive and thrive to new heights, despite their sometimes rocky paths, and found a way to lead in. Today we are here with Vanessa Judelman, the president of Mosaic People Development. How are you today, Vanessa?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And thank you so much for joining us. You know, I think it's important for folks that are listening today to find out a little bit about you as a person. So maybe a personal story. So do you have maybe a story from your childhood that is kind of interesting that you might want to share with us today?
Well, I think most people or many people can relate to the immigrant story. And so my journey as a leadership consultant coach, I often think started when I was 7 years old and my family left Johannesburg, South Africa and moved to Toronto, to Canada. And so that really started the journey for me on self-discovery and personal development. It's really hard, as anyone knows, to leave your family, to leave your home, to leave everything that you've known your entire life and land in a strange country, one with snow, with a different culture. I had a funny accent, a South African accent, which was gone within 2 weeks because the kids at school made fun of me for the way I dressed and the way I spoke. And so that was really the first time in my life where I felt unsafe and where I was in an environment that was really strange and new. And it really started my journey of self-discovery and personal development. It was quite a formative experience.
Well, and adapting too, right? I mean, just coming into something brand new and you're looking around going, okay, I've got to figure out how to fit in here because, you know, everyone wants to fit in to some extent, right?
That's true. And it's interesting, as kids, we want to fit in so badly. And then you look at it through the lens of people at work. And I work with a lot of people who lack confidence as leaders and as women in the world of work. And I think it comes from that place from childhood of really wanting to fit in.
Definitely. So I have a question. One word that describes you best. Do you have one that comes to mind?
Enthusiastic.
Oh, I like it. Enthusiastic. And, you know, tenacity probably too, because I think those two kind of, flow together. And when you're enthusiastic and you're really excited about something, you can kind of get everyone around you kind of feeling the same thing, don't you think?
Yeah, I think enthusiasm is underrated these days. I think if you can do whatever you do in life, whatever your selected career is, and do it with enthusiasm, it's something that I've always admired in other people. And in fact, it was really interesting. I was working with a group of leaders who were in the tech industry. And one of the leaders said to me after the session, he goes, Vanessa, I have to give you some feedback. Is that okay? I said, of course, I'm always open to feedback. He goes, I just find you're just too enthusiastic. I don't even know. I just find it a little inauthentic. Are you really this passionate about the work you do? And I said, to be honest, it was actually really good feedback for me because I was quite miffed by his feedback. But I think what I learned is that in front of some audiences, I do need to adapt my style because my enthusiasm can actually be a little bit overwhelming. So I always share with the leaders that I work with, your strengths, when you overuse them, actually can become weaknesses. So I'm always conscious that I do love what I do and passionate about it. And I bring that enthusiasm, which I love, but also sometimes I do need to dial it down so it's not so overwhelming for people.
I could see that. I could see that, definitely. And that's, just kind of reading the room, too. So a quick question about your career and how long you've been doing what you're doing. why don't you explain to us a little bit about what you do and then how long you've been doing it, also followed up by what you did before.
Sure. So I've been developing leaders for over 20 years. I've been doing it for a long time. What I do is I run a company. It's called Mosaic People Development. And I go into organizations and I develop their leaders, from people who are brand new to leadership to CEOs and executives. And what typically happens in organizations is people get promoted into leadership roles without any training. Right. And the reality is, just because you're good at your job, it doesn't mean, let's say you are an architect, just because you're an excellent architect, it doesn't mean you have the skill set to lead a team of architects or a team of marketing people or engineers, et cetera. And so typically in organizations, people get promoted because they're a strong individual contributor, but leading people is a completely different job. So that's what I do, is I teach the nuts and bolts of leadership, how to coach, what does performance management mean even? How do you give people a performance review? What is formal and informal coaching? How do you sit down with someone and have a coaching conversation with them? How do you develop your team and build a high performing team? I mean, these are all expectations that leaders have of people, but quite frankly, there's strategy and techniques and skills that you can learn to be able to do this job as a leader effectively. So that's what I teach, and I do it through one-on-one coaching as well as training.
And you also are an author, correct?
Yes, I've written a book called Mastering Leadership, What It Takes to Lead in Today's Fast-Paced World.
And boy, is it a fast-paced world.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that. I wrote the book about 3-4 years ago thinking, is this title going to be outdated a few years from now? And somehow, I don't know, the world seems to be getting faster, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I think as you get older, too, you kind of go, oh, my gosh, how do I keep up? I mean, it really does. And I think it's ever evolving. I think one of the things from the pandemic that we've really learned is there's a lot of innovation out there. There's a lot of changes that can happen. And it seems like almost overnight, although like when I look at COVID time, I think, wow, everything feels like it's been such a long amount of time, even though it really hasn't. I don't know. Maybe you don't feel that way, but I definitely feel that way.
No, I feel like it was a time warp. We were all stuck in a time warp.
For
and it
sure.
felt like a long time, especially for those of us who are extroverts. The extroverts really suffered.
For sure. And I never stopped working. So I felt like I was working on triple, quadruple time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. And then I only slept, a small amount of time because, just trying to figure out, okay, what's the next thing? What are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to deal with that? For me, how do I get businesses open and, all of that? I mean, it was really just a lot of brain power, I think.
An intense brain power, really intense.
So share with us, how do you measure success?
How do I measure success?
Yeah.
Oh boy. I think success is deeply personal. And so I think when I think about success, and also you've mentioned sort of as we age, right now my kids are teenagers. For me, when my kids were little, success was much more about work-life balance and being able to pick up my kids from school and having flexibility as an entrepreneur. Now my kids are older. They don't need me as much. And so success is measured, I think, in terms of two things. Part of, as I do grow older, part of what I do, but also how I am. And I used to measure success a lot more in the past by what I do. And now I measure it a lot more by the kind of person I am. Am I the kind of person that smiles at somebody who's helping me at the cash register in the grocery store? Am I the kind of person who donates my time to charity? So it's really interesting. I think that definition of success really changes as we age.
I'm glad you brought that up because I totally agree with that philosophy. So why don't you share with us something that you failed at? We've all failed at some point in time, but maybe something that you learned from a failure, because I always think that failure becomes a success at the end because you learn something from it.
For sure. In fact, I just saw something being posted on LinkedIn, and it was an image of how people learn. And it was from personal experience versus failures, and that the failure pile was super, super high. And I think that's so true, that we learn from failures. I mean, I think we have little learnings every day, little failures. I think about, for me, I one of the hardest times in my life. And I don't know if it's a failure, but I think one of the hardest times in my life was when I was working in corporate before I started my own business. And I came back from my second maternity leave and I had a really, really challenging boss. And before that, I had a wonderful boss. I'd been in the organization for 5 years. I climbed the corporate ladder. And I felt like such a failure in terms of navigating this boss. She was somebody who yelled at me in front of people. She took away a lot of my responsibilities and put them in her sort of initiative, transferred them to her as her own initiative, and really made me feel I think I hate to say this, but even bullied at work. And I know anyone who's had that experience, it's really, really challenging. And so while it's not a failure per se, it was at the time I felt like a failure because I wasn't able to navigate this really challenging person and situation at work. I mean, now I look back on that time and I'm grateful that I had that opportunity to work with a bad boss, because it's made the work that I do as a leadership consultant coach even more important, because I don't want anyone to have the experience that I had. And it's interesting, often when I do sessions with leaders, when I onboard a new group of leaders, I'll say to them, how many of you have had a terrible boss before? And it is amazing how many people raise their hand and say, I can relate to your story, Vanessa. And so from that really terrible experience, I learned so much about resilience. I learned so much about the fact that leaders really set the tone at work, and that if you're a leader, it's by choice. I really believe that people can learn to become leaders. Like, leaders are really made, not born. But you have to choose leadership, because it is a responsibility. You do make or break people's experiences at work. So that really was one of the most challenging experiences that I've had over the years at work.
Well, and back to what you said, you really do get shaped by it, which in the end, it really is a good experience, even though it's very tough when you're going through it. I always say, well, when you look back, in 5 years from now, you're going to see how everything worked together really perfectly. If you do take it in the right way, as in your stride, and then you say, okay, I'm going to take this away from that experience because it really did help me at the end. So anyway, balancing work and life. My kids are older now, but I remember when there were times where I thought, I am such a failure at motherhood. I am just not meeting the mark. And, a lot of women are so hard on ourselves. I think we're actually our worst critics. But, looking at, how you balance everything, are there some experiences that you would like to share with other women that might help them and give them a little bit of hope in all of it? Because it is tough at times. And I think it's very cyclical, too.
It is cyclical, 100%. You know what the most helpful, practical tip for me is your mindset around it, is repositioning it. I don't even call it work-life balance. I call it work-life juggle. And so for me, just having that visual around, we've got lots of balls in our life. And sometimes we're juggling one ball that's higher in the air. And sometimes we're juggling another ball and that's higher in the air. So for me, again, it goes back to the concept of what's important. Is it balance that you're striving for? Is balance even possible when you're a working mom? Sometimes I feel like maybe that's unrealistic. Work-life juggle resonates for me. Sometimes I do need to, if one of my kids is sick, I need to make that a priority, and that ball is higher in the air. So that's one of the visuals and metaphors that I've used over the years that just helped me, I think, to change my expectations around what does balance mean as a mom, as a working mom. And to me, it's much more about juggling.
Well, that's a very good analogy. And sometimes you have 3 balls and sometimes you have 10 balls. And it really depends on what's kind of going on in your life, which, back to the cyclical part. And, it looks different at different times in your life, for sure. So as a female leader, what is the most significant barrier that you've experienced?
Confidence. Because I work with leaders all the time. And when I'm finished working with them, I say to them, let's reflect on this 8 months, 12 months we've worked together. What's changed for you? And the number one thing that I hear leaders, especially female leaders, say is, I feel more confident now. And I don't know why women lack confidence. Maybe it's just the way we were brought up, or we don't have any as many role models as men do in leadership positions, although that's changing a lot. But I think that when people talk about imposter syndrome, that's one of the terms that we have out there in our vernacular that really bothers me. I do not let any of the leaders that I work with talk about imposter syndrome, because I say to them, none of you are imposters. None of you have a syndrome, right? You're leaders. You're in a new position. You're in a new role. It just requires development and learning and skills. Leadership is like a sport. Right? If you play tennis a lot and then all of a sudden you play golf, it's a different sport. And so once you learn how to play the sport, your confidence increases. And so I think confidence is something that you can, as an individual, like think about it. Think about, where am I not feeling confident? And then say to yourself, what are some of the gaps that are causing me to not feel confident? And then grow, learn, develop, find a way to close some of those gaps. So just that awareness of where you're not feeling confident, and then take the initiative to close some of those gaps, to learn and grow and develop.
Well, and that brings me to the next question, and that is mentors, because I think they help shape us, but also if we know what we're talking about and we know our subject matter and we're really fully immersed in that, that gives you more confidence, because if you're prepared, there's just nothing that can overcome that. Even if you're feeling a little bit shy at first, getting out there, but your information, that helps you. But I think also, taking good things and maybe even bad things, you go, okay, I don't want to be a person that comes from that standpoint. As far as mentors go, I think that's really important. Do you have mentors that you can point to and say, yeah, they really helped shape me?
Oh, 100% throughout every stage of my career, early in my career, mid-career, as an entrepreneur. I mean, literally at every stage of my career, I have sought a mentor. And all of my mentors have been very strong, empowered, confident leaders themselves. So I always look to people who are like 10 years ahead of me. And that's who I like to work with as a mentor, someone who's been there, who's done that, who has the hindsight. You mentioned hindsight before, and experience, who has the hindsight and experience to look back and say, I know where you were 10 years ago. And they're able to provide that kind of insight based on their own experience. So those are the kind of mentors that I love to work with. But just to go back to your point around preparation, that is one of the leadership characteristics that I think is incredibly underrated. And people need to spend much more time emphasizing preparation. And I'll give you an example of that. An example of that is doing a presentation. I often do keynote speeches, and I'll go to a conference or an event and I'll do a presentation. People often say to me, did you wing it? Because your style is you're so casual on stage. It's the opposite. The last thing I do is wing it. I spend so much time preparing for a 1 hour presentation. First, I work on the slides. Then I go through the slides. Then I think about what I'm going to say. And then I practice. I know exactly what story I'm going to tell on every slide. So it comes across as very natural, but it's the opposite. It's incredibly prepared. And you're so right. With that preparation comes confidence.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. So what are some lessons learned that you'd like to share with young women and how they can apply those to their lives?
So I think, people talk a lot about passion. I mean, to me, it's funny because my older son, applying for university, for college next year. And so this whole concept about following what you're good at, I think is really, really important. Really trying to, in terms of who do you need to please, it's yourself. That's another lesson that I've learned. If you can't please yourself, you're not going to have a fulfilling career. I find a lot of people go into careers for someone else. Doesn't turn out well.
No kidding. And what I think is also important to remember is when you are not satisfied and you find yourself in a career, it's okay to change. It's okay to pivot. You might say, oh my gosh, this is definitely what I want to do. And you're in the middle of it and you're thinking, this is horrible. This is not for me. But that's a time where you have to look back and say, okay, maybe I can do this or maybe I can do that. And I think people are doing that more. I think, one of the things during, I think, the pandemic is a lot of people decided they no longer want to be in corporate America. They want to go out on their own and try to do something themselves. I would love to see the statistics on that, but I haven't found any yet, of how many people started businesses and how many of them have actually been able to make that transition.
Yeah, I would love to see that statistic. I do know that a frightening statistic is that of female-run businesses, only 2% make more than $1 million.
What?
In their businesses, yeah.
Now, when is that from? Is that from recent, or is that something
That's a recent statistic.
Interesting.
That's a recent statistic. Yes, that only 2% of female businesses make more than $1 million. So there's a lot, speaking of working with mentors, I mean, there's a lot of work for, if you are a female entrepreneur, find yourself a mentor. I've worked with many mentors as an entrepreneur over the years who've really helped me scale my business. Don't do it alone. There's some great women who work with other female entrepreneurs to help you scale your business. So that's a number I'd like to see change.
Definitely. And again, back to the whole mentor part and all of that, taking away even negative experiences, little parts of that to say, okay, I'm never going to do that because I know how that made me feel, or, your negative discussion that you were talking about a little bit earlier of having that very negative experience with a boss that was terrible to work for or work with, and how that affected you. I think those stories and authentic discussions with people saying, hey, listen, I don't know everything, but here's what I learned from this particular experience. I think those are really, really important as well.
I think actually it's a great point you made. So many women come to their career through hard life experiences that they had. Had I never had that terrible boss, would I ever have been so passionate about developing leaders? Probably not. I have a friend who had psoriasis for many, many years and really healed herself through food. And now she runs a business called the Alternative Food Network. And so, there's a lot of women that I see and I love that, who bring their own life experience into the work that they do to help each other. And I think 2023 is the year of the women. I think women are rising. I see them rising. I see more women in leadership roles. I see them coming into leadership roles with more confidence. So this is the year of the woman. I can really see, kind of spiritually and universally, there's a shift there. And so I think for all of us, it's time to really take your power back this year and stand up for what you believe in and speak up more.
So I have a quick question on this, because I see it. I think there is still, not most, but there is still a certain segment of men that have a problem with that. Not all, definitely not all, but I think there are definitely some men that say they support you, but truly they're trying to crush you at the same time. Mm-hmm. Do you still see that in your?
Of course I see that. Of course I see that. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because I'm not concerned about your perspective of me. I'm concerned about my perspective of me. And I really believe the world's very abundant. I live in a big city. There's a lot of people who do what I do in every industry. Seth Godin wrote an amazing book called Purple Cow. I don't know if you know Purple Cow. Seth Godin writes a lot of books around marketing. And what he talks about in his book, Purple Cow, is that, in every industry, whether you're a lawyer or an accountant or a teacher or a coach, there's going to be many people who do what you do, but you have to be the purple cow. You have to be the cow that stands out in the field. And so for me, I don't need to work with everybody. As an entrepreneur, I choose my clients too. And so if you're not aligned with my energy, with the way I work, with my positivity, with my view of the world, I'm good with that. And go find someone else to work with. Really, I honestly really do believe that.
Absolutely. And, because you can't force a relationship that's going to work out and be beneficial. It doesn't work. You can't force a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't work. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there is also some foresight to be able to say, okay, this isn't working out, or, some, I don't even know how I would put that, but being able to say that didn't work out, that's not working out, I need to shift here. It's not beneficial. It's not mutually what we need to do here, and we need to figure out something else.
And I always say to people, look at your sphere of influence, right? Because there's certain things that are in your sphere of influence and certain things that are out of your sphere of influence. Out of your sphere of influence are other people's thoughts, behaviors, actions, and beliefs. In your sphere of influence is the way that I manage those people. Do I choose to engage with them, or do I choose to just let it go and ignore them? Do I choose to try work with them so they can see my perspective, or do I just say, you know what, never going to change their mind and that's okay, and move on? So that's also what I think is really important for all of us to think about is, where do you waste your time and energy? If you're working with someone like that who is never going to be aligned with your perspective and your values, you have a choice. You could just let it go and move on, and not waste your energy worrying about the fact that this person is misaligned. That's okay, right? You do you and let them do them. And really, because a lot of people worry about things that are out of their sphere of influence, but the reality is you cannot change somebody else's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, perspectives. You can only focus on your reaction to them.
Well, and there's also a segment of that where you're going to be stuck with people that you absolutely cannot align with, and you have to figure out how to work with them, no matter what. There's just got to be some middle ground. And I think as a leader, too, that's really important to be able to have some discernment in that, to say, okay, they're not going anywhere. We're stuck together. How do I make them part? How do I come together with them as part of the team? Because I can't change that.
Yeah. And I think for me, one of the ways I do that is by focusing on what I can do, again, what's within my sphere of influence to build trust in that relationship. So when you think about trust, it's a couple things. One is your character and the other is your competence. So I always think about my character. Am I being respectful? Am I being loyal? Am I being transparent with this person? Even though I don't necessarily get along with them, I can own that. And then I also think about competence side. Am I getting the job done? Am I having those crucial conversations with that person when necessary, even though they might be challenging? Am I being accountable? So
and effective too, effective as you possibly can be in that situation.
Yes. Am I, like, for example, am I keeping my commitments to them?
Right.
Am I listening? Am I extending trust in the best way that I can?
I totally agree. So you walk into a room of young women, other leaders, and you have some advice or, some wisdom, nuggets of wisdom. What would be some of the things that you'd like to share with them?
You do you. I love to tell people, you do you. And what does that mean? Well, that's part of discovering what's important to you in life. But follow what's important to you. Think about what going back to your question around success. Think about what success means to you, not to anybody else. When you think about your career, you're never stuck. You're never, ever stuck. You can always make a change. But you have to do it in a way that aligns with who you are, who's in your heart, what drives you personally, with your, talents that you've been given, et cetera. So I think that's really important for women to know, that they need to own who they are and spend time. And if you don't know, what does that mean? Me, do me, like, who am I? Well, then spend the next year figuring it out. Do some self-assessments, for example. Ask people. I always like to say, go speak to 3 people who know you well and say, what are 3 qualities that you see in me? I just had a client of mine left her position, is looking for a new role. And I just spoke to her about an hour ago. She asked me that question. She said to me, Vanessa, I'm working on my resume. What do you think? You've worked with me for 5 years. What do you think is my value proposition? Isn't that a great question to ask somebody?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And no one is going to be exactly the same as someone else, because we do have different personalities. We have different styles. We have all of these things that have happened in our life that truly have shaped us. And how do we stay authentic to that? And for me, I find it very easy because I know I am confident in who I am. But I have to tell you, I'm in my mid-50s. For so many years, I questioned, maybe I should change a little bit. Maybe I should change a little bit. Truly, we shouldn't. We should take what we are, definitely, modify a little bit of, what we're doing and how we're getting there. But the truth is, no one's going to be exactly the same as me, and no one's going to be exactly the same as you. And each person has that special style, that special this, the special that. And I think as women too, my son, this is hilarious. He's 26. When he was really young, he used to say to me, "Mom, there's something special about girls. There's something about them. I just can't put my finger on it." But it's true. And every woman has some really beautiful, special thing about them. But it translates completely different in each one of us. But there is a uniqueness that I think is very interesting to be celebrated. Right? Do you see that?
Oh, yeah, I 100% see that. Women bring to the table so much more intuition. That is such a gift that women have, because I work with male and female leaders all the time, and I love them both.
Yes.
And it's the female leaders who I say, what is your intuition telling you about that situation right now? And when they actually pause and think about it, they always come up with the right answer for themselves. It's a gift that we have as women, that intuition.
And you know what, I've during a lot of conversations with different women, I have had a lot of women say to me, trust your gut, because we're always right at the end. Always. We try to ignore it, but at the end, we really are always right, which is a really interesting thing because I've heard that from lots of different women. It's really interesting. I've never had a man say that to me, but I have definitely had women say that to me, which is interesting. So what's next in your journey? Tell us a little bit about what looks next for you, Vanessa.
Yeah, it's funny. I just had this conversation with my client. She's saying, are you the kind of person who set goals? I'm like, absolutely. I love goals. I love setting goals because I always think if you don't set a goal, what are you going to accomplish? So I'm going to be starting working on a new book this year. I'm going to be running a leadership summit this year, which I've never done before. And that'll be launching in May. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And then just doing great work. I want to speak on more podcasts, which I love. I love podcasts. I'm obsessed with them. I love listening to them. I love speaking on podcasts. It's just such a great medium to have really wonderful, meaningful conversations with people. And also, I'm encouraging my clients to meet in person a lot more this year too. I think it's really, it's easy to kind of stay at home in your pajamas. But that human connection that we didn't have through the pandemic, we got to connect again. So I want to do more connecting this year.
Well, and as you mentioned before, extroverts, being not out there, not having that connection in person is really hard on them. And I think it really can stagnate us when we're not out there, having those connections because they are very, very important to us.
100.
So thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation, Vanessa. Really appreciate it. And, really look forward to seeing all the new things that you're starting this year, the new book and your leadership program. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us today here on SheEO Lead-In. Vanessa Judelman, the president of Mosaic People Development. Thank you.
Now that was powerful. We hope you've been lifted and encouraged by today's inspiring voice. Always remember that life doesn't look exactly the same for each one of us. Never stop dreaming, striving, and thriving. In future episodes, we look forward to bringing you powerful stories from amazing women who learned how to lead in to challenges. Thank you for listening and being part of our community with SheEO host, Rebecca Jones.